In Masada, the world does not wait for you. Ships and their pilots go about their lives, whether you're there or not. Miners hold back ore from excavators, and traders run goods across dangerous space. Elsewhere, you'll find fleets fight entire battles that you had nothing to do with. Your goal then is to decide how to insert yourself into this world. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is what makes Masada potentially a very standout game. And let's be perfectly honest about this. This is the type of game, it's a type of game world that most AAA studios and perhaps even AA studios have stepped back from over the years. It's something that we're just not seeing much of in the space game genre. So the game is called Masada. It's been developed by Studio Messiah. It's been in development for over 2 years at this point. And it's an ambitious single-player space sandbox that ultimately blends real-time strategy fleet management in a highly complex unscripted background world. Now, at its core, the game features a fully simulated dynamic economy, we touched on that right at the start of the video, where you can basically find a galaxy full of rival AI factions who actively compete for the resources in the environment in the world. And what was really making this quite interesting to me is that rather than relying on the scripted story events, the entire game world functions as a kind of living machine, kind of like a living, breathing universe. Naturally then, that means a lot of things within the game world happen on their own. And this happens, for example, as supply and demand shifts realistically as ships move around. Also, you can find that territorial borders will fluctuate based on various different fleet actions. And then of course there's pirate factions who naturally exploit the various different vulnerable areas and various different sectors. As a player, it will be your goal to choose to carve out your own little empire through various different tactical homeworld style of 3D combat, and you can also engage in diplomacy or even build up an economic powerhouse. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that this is very ambitious indeed, and only time will tell if this actually pays off. The developers are clearly very intent on building a game that is autonomous and self-contained, but you know, a lot of people have tried it over the years and it doesn't always work. But when it works very well, because you know, that's the thing that's genuinely rare and generally quite impressive about this when it is pulled off. Now think about what it means for gameplay. You could be crossing a nebula here and you spot a trade convoy that's limping home. Maybe it's damaged. Something's already happened to them elsewhere in the game. Perhaps it was a fight that took place that you weren't a part of, you weren't even aware of, but it did actually physically happen. And now you've got a choice that the game didn't script for you. You can escort them, you can rob them, you can follow them at a distance and see who else is hunting them, or perhaps even see where they're heading to. It's a type of scenario that plays out when you as a player are not the centre of the universe. And we see this in other games like EVE Online, which is online of course, or X4 Foundations, which is a single player game. Games which unfold in dynamic ways. In other words, another way of putting this, it's not the type of space game that says, go to a waypoint and kill 5 enemies. But instead, what happens is you play the game and experience these dynamic stories. For example, maybe you followed the wrong ship and things went quite catastrophically wrong, although right at the last minute you crawled out of it all a little bit richer than when you went in. Now, a game like this, of course, requires a pretty nice world for it to all unfold in, because if the world itself is bland, then it doesn't matter how dynamic it is, it's just not going to be interesting. And Masada does appear to be pretty rich in itself, as well as lore, as well as an environment. So in a lot of the footage, you'll see here a vast exotic nebula. It's cut off, far from any star system, and humanity is trapped here. In fact, it has been for thousands of years. Long enough, in fact, that the people who stuck inside have splintered into completely different civilizations. You've got some nomads just trying to survive out in the dust. You've got powerful empires grinding against each other for total control. And my favourite one here is a black hole worshipping theocracy. And these are the type of divergent civilizations that, when put into a small contained area and mixed together, well, things are just going to get pretty interesting, aren't they? Those are the components then of the game world that basically dropped into an open world spaceship game that is also an RTS with RPG-like progression. And yes, even as I'm recording this video, I can totally see a lot of the comments. This is exactly like Homeworld in many ways. It's heavily inspired by it in many ways, without a shadow of a doubt. And of course, the original Homeworld game also had a similar setup with the Kadashi. Remember them in the nebula-like cult from the Holy Garden. I also want to mention briefly that I did release a short on this yesterday. I've got a little video out there, and I noticed a few people in the comments saying something along the lines that the team behind this also worked on Homeworld. But I haven't seen anything verifying that whatsoever, and as far as I can see, I might be wrong, but as far as I can see, that is a completely unsubstantiated claim. I don't see anything on that. But if you know something more about this than I do, please do let me know in the comment section. Now, very recently, the developers did release a full combat breakdown video. I believe that was released last week or thereabouts, and it gives us a really nice insight into how this game is actually going to play. So it starts before any shot is even fired, and the developers talk through their gameplay session. The video, by the way, is around about 16 minutes long. I will link it below in case you want to watch it. Here's a brief summary though. Essentially, when you spot an enemy, you don't automatically necessarily know what that enemy is. You just see a contact there. So you're going to have to learn what you're facing, what its weapons are, what its armor is, even at the skill level of its crew. And you can do this by identifying it. So to do so, you send out a scout who is built for speed and has long-range sensors. Then the fight itself is the classic video game setup of rock, paper, scissors, but for fleas. That means you've got situations where missiles do reliable explosive damage and brilliant against small fighters. Autocannons hit harder with kinetic damage, but less reliably. And then you've got artillery, which smashes the big targets from range. Some ships can tank hits behind heavy armor. Others rapidly regenerate their shields, which generate their capacitors to actually do that. Things go a fair bit deeper though. For example, you can target specific subsystems, such as engines, sensors, turrets, the power generator, and much more. Cripple the right parts of the ship, and that becomes disabled. For example, you can kill the enemy's engines, and that means it won't be able to flee. But that said, apparently these systems do slowly self-repair, so you're kind of racing against the clock a bit, and it means you can't just shoot the engines of a ship and leave it there, expecting it never to be able to get back into the fight again. Also, in classic RTS style, you don't have to manage every single ship, you don't have to micromanage every single ship. Instead, you can give your ships behaviors. For example, a strike run, where they'll make a dogfighting attack pass, and then you have formations where they clump up and focus fire. You can tell them to keep at range, they'll hang back with their guns always firing. You can tell them to brawl, and they'll charge right into the enemy's face, and really might take a beating for it, either side that is. Another command is orbit, where your ships will circle the target, and they're moving fast enough here that the enemy's heavy weapons physically can't keep up. And that means that the big guns can't rotate quickly enough to actually track these smaller units, so generally they will miss. So they're implying full-on simulated combat here. Now, like I say, if you want the full deep dive into the whole combat scenario, do take a look at that video because it'll give you a really good insight as to how this is all going to play out. And my take is that this is very much like Homeworld indeed, but that the setting, the background simulation of the entire game, really does put it in quite a different trajectory to what we've seen before. All of this though comes of course with the usual caveats. The game is still in early development, there's no real way for us to know exactly how things are going to play out, and even the devs say so themselves that things are still very much in active development and improvement. They do say one such thing as the formation AI isn't working perfectly right now, so they are constantly testing it. The bottom line is that they are a small team, but this is a very ambitious game, and we've seen in the past how that can all play out. It can play out in both very different directions. On the one hand, it might not necessarily work out as the developers hope. On the other hand, we sometimes see games from small studios that turn out to be the next big thing. And fingers crossed then that this is the later rather than the former. Like I say, do check out the other links in the video description. You'll find out plenty more on the game. Meanwhile, do let me know what you think about all of this. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in those comments. So thanks for watching this video all the way through. There is another one on the screen if you want to check that out. Do take care, and I'll catch you next time.